Hello, do you know what a Hauf and a Hauf is? And could Fife become a whiskey tourism hotspot? Keep listening to find out. I'm John Beattie, and welcome to Cask to Glass, the whiskey podcast, where I explore the heritage and flavour of Scotland's national drink and the world's favourite spirit. In this episode, I talked to Scott Sneddon, the MD of InchDairnie Distillery. Scott, hello. Thank you very much indeed for talking to me today.
No, thank you very much for having me, John.
We always ask everybody that comes on, first of all, how do you take your whiskey?
Depending how I feel, if I'm honest. So this year we launched our second vintage of Rilo, so I've been tinkering with it. So I've been taking it neat. I've been adding a little bit of water. I've been adding it with ice. I've been making it as a lovely old-fashioned cocktail. So I'm very fluid with how I take my whiskey, because I'm a very old-fashioned, as like a Hauf and a Hauf. So I always like a beer and a whiskey at the same time. So it really depends on what beer I've got in my other hand and how I take my whiskey.
I think, see, Hauf and a Hauf reminds me of working on building sites as a teenager when the men would have a Hauf and a Hauf. I think you're the first person to mention a Hauf and a Hauf. And for our American viewers and listeners, just remind people what a Hauf and a Hauf is.
Well, a Hauf and a Hauf is basically a drammy whiskey and a beer, a glass of beer. And I've done it for a long time, and I find as I get older, your flavour, how you taste things change. So what I try and do is I maybe stick to the same whiskey and change the beer, or stick with the same beer and change the whiskey, and the flavour combination changes. So as we're coming out of the summer months, so the summer months I tend to have a light with beer, maybe an IPA or something like that, and I tend to have a nice bit of a simple dram, and I mean a simple dram, just something that's been in an ex-bourbon. But with the Rilo, I've been trying to experiment with that just purely for my own satisfaction. But as the seasons go on and we come closer to winter, I tend to drink to a heavier beer, an 80 or a 70 shilling. And then with that heaviness in the beer, I tend to go for a more complex whiskey, something that's maybe got a bit of sherry in it, a bit of age. And then as it goes real into winter, I can incorporate a lot of peatedness into my dram. So I've been doing that for as long as I can remember getting an interest in whiskey. It's just stuck with me.
Seasonal drinking.
Yeah, I'm very much a seasonal drinker, but I'm not too rigid. If somebody offered me a dram, I wouldn't say, no, that's not the dram of the season. Of course I would take it. But
And you take a wee sip of the Hauf and then a wee sip of the beer, isn't it?
Yep.
Together.
I'll drink, I could be drinking, though, if it's a first beer, I'll drink more of the beer to start with, and then associate it with the dram. But as the evening goes on and I have more, you tend to go between the two, because it just changes the flavours of your mouth, I find. I've been doing it a long time, and it's just second nature to me.
We're diverting. I was in Fort William at the weekend doing the whole Harry Potter thing in the Glenfinnan Viaduct. Brilliant thing. But it's the Ben Nevis Distillery, and I was finishing my evening with a whiskey. But you would drink the whiskey with your beer.
Yes, well, look, it depends on. I'm not sticking to that. I always do it. It depends on how I feel, but I tend to, majority of the time, if I'm at home, I'll do that. If I'm out for a pub or a bar, I'll start off with a beer and then introduce a dram as the night goes on. But when I'm at home, I tend to, I have a smaller glass, so it's not a full pint; it's a smaller can, or a smaller bottle. So, but that's how I've always done it.
Tell me all about InchDairnie. Tell me about this business, this distillery, this place. Who are you? I mean, you actually kindly dropped off some bottles for me, and you mentioned Rilo. That's the Rilo there. And we'll get on to the different products, but just tell me all about yourselves and what's happening.
So InchDairnie Whisky as an entity has only been about since the 1st of May. And that was a result of a merger between InchDairnie Distillery, which I've been part of since the founding beginning 2015, and a company called Macduff International, which has been about since the 1990s. And Macduff International were historically a blending house. So they owned Lauders, Isle of Mist, and Waterproof. So Lauders and Isle of Mist have got a long history and a long heritage. Lauders has been about since about 1871. In fact, the Lauders Bar off Sauchiehall Street is where it all started. And then Isle of Mist is a little bit newer. It's from 1927, from as it says, from Isla, when the 21st birthday of John Morrison. So the brands that have been about, and in the early 19s, a trio of people formed Macduff International purely with growing those brands. They acquired those brands. And then when we were building the distillery in 2015, Macduff International was my biggest customer. What that means is I'd be producing spirit, new make spirit, which would either be laid down to be used in the blends or to be exchanged for other grains and malts, which would end up in the blends. So they've been very much instrumental of our beginning of the distillery. And then as we progressed, and then in 2023, we launched our first product, which is Rilo, and they did the sales and marketing for that. So there's been a lot of synergy between the two businesses, and we've worked in close partnership with each other. And then since the 1st of May this year, we became one. So what that really gives us is a good, the company is basically built on tradition, but it's been powered by innovation. And what I mean by that is the distillery we have is quite modern. We do things in a slightly different way, so it's a good bringing in tradition and the more modern. So it's so far so good. It's been really good. As I said, we've got the brands that we spoke about. We've got the InchDairnie brands of Rilo and Kinglassy, which was launched this year.
Yeah.
And then we've got the Lauders Isle of Mist and Waterproof, with Waterproof being, it's only been about the last 5 years, and that's a blended malt, which you can see there. So quite
I've got the bottle here in my hand. I mean, I have to say that they're beautifully packaged. I mean, these are beautiful bottles. I mean, just the look of your stuff, it just looks great, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, a lot of thought and effort has been on that. As new brands or growing brands, the first thing the consumer sees is the bottle. So we want the bottle to be catching and also intrigue the people to then look a little bit further. So the Rilo bottle you've got in your hand, there's 10 design points on that bottle that brings the distillery, InchDairnie Distillery, more to life, which so that consumers know. Whiskey's, from my view, is all about sharing. It's all about bringing a group of people, talking about it. And if you are hosting the people and you've got the bottle in your hand, if somebody says to you, "What's that?" and you can rhyme off even 4 or 5 of those key parts, that's you engaging the audience. And that's what whiskey can always be, is about that socialization that it brings.
Tell me about you. We've mentioned this a few times, Rilo, and this one I've got is that it's a Fife single grain Scotch whiskey, vintage 2018, bottle 2025, strength 46.3, cask type charred new oak, variant, and it's Appalachian wood. Just tell me about this, because you mentioned this a few times.
Okay, so the equipment that we have at InchDairnie Distillery, we don't have a traditional mash tun that all the industry have. We're one of only 2 in Scotland that has a mash filter. And that's important because a mash filter enables you to process grains that would otherwise be quite difficult to process in a traditional distillery. So how the Rilo came about is part of our, we always, to look forward, you sometimes have to look backwards. So there's records from the 1908 Royal Commission. And within those records, it details what grains were being used in distilling at that time. Okay. And one of them is rye. But there is no definition of rye whiskey in Scotland. The regs don't allow it. So that's one of the reasons why we have to call it a single grain, because there is no definition for a Scottish rye. You will notice on the side label, however, we have labelled it as a Scottish rye. If you look, the side of it does say Scottish rye.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
So from a rye perspective, we had to look to America, because America is where people tend to associate with a rye whiskey. Now, rye whiskey in America, it defines, to make it, it has to be a minimum of 51% of the rye grain. It has to be put into virgin oak wood at a strength of less than 62.5%. So those were the only guidelines you have. So what we did as a distillery is we kind of gave it a contemporary Scottish twist. And what I mean by that is, when we make whiskey, we malt the grain. We malt the barley. That's where you get the malt, single malt coming from. So in this instance, we malted the barley, but we also malted the rye. And we made a mash bill of 53% rye, 47% barley, and we processed it through our mash filter. And then we did double distillation that you get in Scotland. But for the second distillation, we used a Loman still. And the Loman still is a pot still with a column still on the neck. And what that gave is a very, very light spirit, very flavoursome as well. And we put that into a virgin oak cask. So the first release of the rye law was matured for 5 years in virgin oak from the Ozark region of America. The bottle you've got in your hand is from the Appalachian forest of America. So that's the differences between the two, what we call the vintages. No, the 2017 was the original, and the 2018 is what you've got in your hands. And what we've found is that the original one was a lot more sweet, a lot of more vanilla, a lot more caramel with the lovely spiciness in the side of the tongue. But for the new vintage, the influence of the vanilla and caramel from the wood is less. So what that does is it's allowed more of the spice to be showcased from the rye, but also there's a woodiness that's coming in from it, and it's adding a lot more complexity. So for people that have tried the original rye law, this is taking it in a slightly different direction, and that's purely from the maturation. Now, one of the guiding principles of the distilleries, we call it the 3 M's. So that's material, method, and maturation. So anything that we do from an innovation point of view, does it contain within those 3 M's? So the material is what we spoke about, is we used the rye grain instead of normal grain. The method, I used a Loman still, and then in the maturation, I used virgin oak wood. Now, virgin oak is historically not been used in making Scotch. It is growing in favour now, but historically it's not been used. So by going to rye law, we are really looking at how can we shape the flavour, how can I shape the flavour going forward. So each year that I've done a campaign for the rye, I've put it into a different wood from a different region of America, all American virgin oak. And each year, each vintage is giving me a different flavour profile. So it's very much something that we're looking on to understand the impact the wood, the third part, the maturation, is having on the flavour within the cask.
So the vision of the distillery then, because these are beautiful spirits. You've told me a bit about the history. Where do you sell mostly to? Which products go where? You've got some new products coming out as well. You've got new releases.
Yeah.
So what's the vision for the distillery?
So at the moment, from a market point of view, so the new product, so the rye law is available. It's a global market. So we have that in the UK, America, Canada, Taiwan, France, Germany, Australia. The lauders and the Isle of Mist, they're mainly for the export markets. So the lauders we do quite well in Europe and a lot in the Nordics. The Isle of Mist is also in the Nordics, but also in Canada and Japan. So one of the things we're looking at is we're introducing the rye law, and as of this year, our second product is Kinglassy, which is a peated single malt. So we're showcasing them in the UK and then spreading them around the world. For the other brands that we spoke about, we're looking to bring them into the UK as well, because they're our home market. So it's what we're trying to do is the merger of the two businesses is taking the best of both, if that makes sense, and so that we can then go with quite a wide portfolio, because whiskey consumers have different taste profiles of what they're looking for. You've got people who are wanting the rye and something a little bit different, but there's people who have brought the Hauf and Hauf is a good example. They want a good whiskey, which tends to be a blend, to go with their beer or just to be in its own. And that's where the lauders comes into play, and that's also with the Isle of Mist, because Isle of Mist is a blend, but it's got a lovely subtlety of peatiness. So for some people, the heavily peated products might not to be their liking, but the Isle of Mist is a good transition into that. And equally, the Kinglassy is a heavily peated malt, but it's got less of what people associate from Islay, the medicinalness and that TCP kind of thing. It's a lot lighter and it's more on the smokiness. So the concept of the business is about flavour, is about having a brand portfolio that's wide enough that we have something for everybody.
We mentioned I was in Fort William, and part of being on the train was you could buy some whiskey, and there was an Australian couple who were sampling whiskies, and the Americans on the train too were talking about they were visiting certain whiskey places, And I'm conscious that you guys, you're maybe not on the main whiskey trail. There's this new thing, isn't there, which is a Fife as a place
Yes.
or whiskey. So just explain to listeners and viewers, because what strikes me is I've said this on almost every podcast. The big untold story of Scotland is we have hundreds of thousands of people in this country coming principally for golf and whiskey and the scenery.
Yes.
And they all love it. They love it. When you talk, they love it. They come from the couple I was with, they came from Perth, Western Australia, basically to go around some distilleries and see about the country. So you guys are in Fife. Tell me about the whole growth of, whiskey in Fife as an area.
Yeah, so what people tend to know about the regionality of Scotland tends to be how it was a number of years ago. So we define it as being a lowland, a highland, Speyside, Cameltine, Isla. So those historically were there to do from an excise point of view. The customs and excise man would go around these places. And also, far enough back, there was an influence of the flavours of those different regions were kind of defined as being the same.
Yeah.
But over time, that analogy it's still used, but there is a lot more differentiation across a bit. So when we talk about Fife, it's about being proud of the location. So Fife is a great place to be growing the barley. It's got great fields and great quality, and being
it's everywhere, isn't it? Barley in Fife and in Lothians is everywhere.
So for Fife, so the distillery has been running for 10 years. So in the last 10 years, there's been about 6 distilleries that's either already been existing in Fife. I mean, we have Cameron Bridge, which is the big green one, which is in Fife. But we also have been small, independent malt distilleries. So we've got Daft Mill, which was the starting point. Then you've got King's Barns, which is attached to St Andrews and the golf. You've got Lindores Abbey come out. So then you've the original. You've now got Eden Mill are building the new one near St Andrews. And I said we've been in Glenrothes for the last 10 years. So there's quite a lot of new emerging distilleries within that one region. So there's now enough 5. And what we're trying to do is establish Fife as a place for whiskey as well. Now it's very early stages. What we're trying to do is speak to the other distilleries to see, is there something that we can do here that people, when they come to Fife, know about it. I mean, one of the things that we are proud of is the InchDairnie brand. So like the rye and the Kinglassy, we want to be Fife Provenance. So we want the grain to be grown in Fife, the product to be distilled in Fife, matured in Fife, and if possible, bottled in Fife. So everything is done within the one area. The other distilleries are coming around to that either through they also grow their own barley and they try and keep it within Fife. So you've already started getting that small similarities. So it's trying to then build that on, because we want people to be establishing Fife as a destination for whiskey. Now we're not open to the public, but the other distilleries are. But we want, like you said, people from all over the world want to go and visit when they come to Scotland. Also because when it rains quite a lot when they come on holiday, so what can we do when it's raining? Let's go and see a distillery. But they also, as you said, people from far and wide, they can get a product in their home country and they say, how is this made? I'd like to go and see this being made or where it is. And then they do come over. So it's about bringing people to Fife and showcasing Fife, what a wonderful place it is to be. So that's what we're trying to do. It's very early stages, but Fife for us is a great part of our Provenance story.
Do you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't think anybody I spoke to the weekend was going to Fife. But in terms of places to go in the country, and again, to explain to people who are listening or watching from overseas, Fife is just north of Edinburgh, up on the right, that bit. It's beautiful. It's golf country. You can go there and the sky's always 10 miles higher than it is in Glasgow or the West Coast. It doesn't rain as much. And it's a beautiful place to go. And I guess they invented the North Coast 500, didn't they? They've got the kind of Speyside Valley as a whiskey thing. What's the plan to try and invent something, not invent, but to reinforce a message that says this is an area? How do you do that globally?
I think it's a case of just having a starting point. So as I said, the distilleries I spoke about are all fairly new. So it's about the focus has been as you as a business looking after yourself, But we, for the last, since the inception of the Fife Whisky Festival, we've all been there. So that's when we tend to meet and have a conversation. The problem is it's the next year before you meet again, just because of the way we're so busy. But when you do get together, there is a passion and there is a desire to do something and make and recognise Fife more. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's just a means of getting everybody together to then have a clear plan of what we want to achieve in a relevant time scale to do it.
So just reinforce the products then. I've got a few in front of me. What are all the products and what are the new ones again? Just remind me.
Okay, so as a starting point, people tend to look at a blend. So the starting blend is Lauders, which is just right in front of you.
That one there.
Yeah, that's there. So that's the non-peated blend. You've then got the Isle of Mist, which is a peated blend.
Is that behind me on the mantelpiece?
Which is up behind you. And then you've got the blended malt, which is a waterproof, which is in front of you there. Yep.
So that's a blended malt.
That's a blended malt.
Yeah.
So then you go to the more extreme. So the Rylaw, which is the bottle you showed, is the Scottish rye whiskey. That's there. And then from May this year, we released our first single malt from the distillery, which is Kinglassy, which is a heavily peated single malt. And there's two versions of that, which you can see behind me here. You've got this one.
Oh,
here,
yeah.
This is the raw, and this one here is the double matured. So the raw has spent 8 years in ex-bourbon casks, and the reason why it's raw is very little influence from the cask. It's mainly showcasing the spirit. And then the double matured, which is here, has spent 5 years in the same casks, and then 3 years in a Amontillado seasoned cask. So the best way to explain it is, for the first 5 years, those liquids were the exact same. And then all we've done is we've diverged the last 3 years. And again, that's showcasing the effect of maturation. So the third M on the flavour profile of it. And how it came about is people who are peated whiskey drinkers, it's a very much a love or hate relationship with it. Because what people know is peated whiskey is very intense. It tends to be more Islay dominated and island dominated. So we used mainland peat up from the north of Scotland, northeast of Scotland. It's in Fergus, and that the vegetation that's been part of the peat process is mainly heathers and flowers and things like that. So it's not as intense medicinalness of it, and also by putting it into the Amontillado cask, we've kind of diminished the peatiness of it. So the best way to do it is, this was developed for people who were interested in peated whiskey, but were not quite getting what was already there. So it's bringing more of that smokiness, and the sweetness coming from Amontillado kind of helps that. But equally, there's people who want that intensity of that. So if you can imagine this, if you were explaining it, it's like a velvet almond smoke. So what I mean by that is, the almonds is what you get from the Amontillado. The velvet in this is the texture that you get from that marrying of that, and it's mainly smoke that you get. Whereas the raw here, that's a bigger hit. It's more like smouldering fireplace hit is how we describe it. Really? It's like you sit at a fireplace, and it's those smoking embers that no diminish coming to you. That's what it's like in a glass. So it's got whiskey with that hit. So we're finding that people are starting off with one but jumping to the other depending on how they are. So it's been really well received by the market, which is always good, because when you come up with these ideas, we can need to do it for ourselves, but if others can appreciate it as well, that's what it's all about.
Scott, the main reason we do this podcast is we all think it's really important. I just think we underestimate how important whiskey is to the country, and also what a great product it is. And so anyone listening, so again, listening to the Australians and Americans that we talked to in this Harry Potter railway carriage going over the Glenfinnan Viaduct on a really dreich weekend, you're right, they didn't like the peat stuff. They didn't, we don't like the peat, it's too sharp. What would you say to people, not to forget the peat, what would you say to people listening or watching about why should they try whiskey? Why try it?
I think, well, from my own experiences, I enjoy the taste of whiskey, but I've not always enjoyed the taste of whiskey. What I did is, I've been in the industry for 19 years, and like a lot of Scottish people, had bad experiences of trying whiskey for the first time and overdoing it. So when I joined the industry, I was very much sampling and tasting it, but doing it in a controlled manner. And that's where I started appreciating. And once you start to appreciate it, you then start saying, well, I like this product. Well, I like these other products. So that means you go to other places and you drink it. And there is some whiskies that I prefer to others, but I like whiskey. But also, whiskey can be influenced by the occasion, because when you taste whiskey and you remember it, it's how it's recognised and recorded in your memory. That's why people associate a lot of the flavours of whiskey from their childhood. It's flavours of, we talk about peatedness as carbolic soap and TCP. I'm a child of the 70s, and it brings me right back to my childhood. That's the beauty of whiskey. You could also, whiskey can be, you remember where you were when a certain whiskey had a big impact on you. No, you talked about where you were driving over the viaduct, train. If you're having a dram at that time, the next time you have that dram, you could be right the way back there. So whiskey is a drink for me is best. You can have it on your own, but I find it's best if you're shared amongst other people. The problem sometimes people feel with whiskey is that people say, no, I get X and Y from it. And people think, well, I did get that. I don't get that.
Yeah.
So
I don't get the bubble gum. Yeah.
I must be wrong. And it's not as we did an exercise at the distillery when we launched the original vintage of Rylon. We got 5 of the key flavours distilled into these samples. And the group of people who came to the opening of the launching of the brand, and also for the team itself, we tested it. And we let them nose it. And the difference was huge. But it was a case of, look, you're not wrong. That's what it is to you. And I think that's what we're trying to educate people is whiskey's about enjoying it. It's a dram, it's a social dram. There's people who, like anybody, want to know more and develop it further, and that's fine. But that could be a small percentage of it. What I want somebody when they when they drink any whiskey, not even just what we're on, is they enjoy it. That's a key thing. And don't be afraid to try new things. And there'll be certain things that you might not like. But if you keep trying, I'm sure you'll find something that you do enjoy. And that's what I love about it. But equally, there's whiskies that I love. But even now, when I go back to them over a period of time, I learn something new about them. So whiskey is not a drink that you always get at the same time. No, it does change within the bottle. It changes what you've eaten that day, changes as you age. So I've been drinking whiskey for over 25 years, but I'm still learning. I'm still not, I don't know, I'm not the fountain of all knowledge. I'm still learning, still experimenting, still learning new things, learning new whiskies as well. Not just even Scotch. My palates, I'm looking wider. That's why I know about rye whiskies and bourbons and others. But for me, for whiskey is such a wonderful product. And the fact it's unique to Scotch is so unique to us. And my one thing I would love is that people around the world have a far better appreciation of the product than the people in Scotland. I wish we would be proud of it. I remember I've been in the industry for 19 years. And a few years ago, I went to a dinner. It's part of the IBD, it's the Institute of Brewing and Distilling Scottish section. And there was this young, newly qualified, newly assistant manager. And he came up to it and he was smiling from ear to ear. And one of his older guys said, "What are you smiling about?" He says, "I'm one distillery manager of 148 in the world. How proud am I?" And we thought, do you know what? He's got it right. That we are, sometimes you can be so focused on what you're doing. It's good to take a step back to appreciate that we are part of a very small club, considering the wider world, of producing good quality Scotch that can be appreciated the world over. And that's what I love about being in the industry, is that appreciation that I have for the product. But when you meet other people, I mean, if you go to any pub anywhere and you start having a dram, chances are you'll get somebody will start a conversation with you. It is an icebreaker. And also, it takes away the barriers of society. You could have somebody doing one task that might be a simple role, a job, to somebody that's a high flyer. Whiskey is the defining one that will join them together, and that's what I love about it. You get those unplanned events in pubs where you start talking and start exchanging stories, and that's where it makes the magic, and that boost builds upon it, because humans were sociable creatures, and whiskey is just an element of bringing that all together, I think.
That's a great way of putting it, isn't it? It just opens up a conversation. whiskey started the conversation on the train.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
they had whiskey. So, yeah, well, and also I hadn't appreciated that whole thing of you only, if you're the whiskey manager, you're one of 150,
Yeah.
and that's it. Um, Again, I could talk to you for 3 hours, but let's just, think about winding up. But before we do, a couple of things. Graham, your colleague, texted me last night at 10:20. He was just leaving the office. Do you work really late, you fellas? What happens?
Well, whiskey doesn't stop, I suppose. So I mean, there's lots of things. There's always something going on, and it's you try and like any business. There's some times where you have to get the head down and knuckle down, things to be done. But equally, if you like today, you get to talk about it. You get to go and if you do a tasting, you get to do it. And that's the variety of the business and the job.
Yeah.
It can be that level of detail 1 minute, emails or a specific task needed to be done, to socialising and interacting with people either at a whiskey show or just in a local pub. That's what I love about the industry.
And before you go, just reinforce to people watching or listening the arrival of Fife as a place and how they should stick Fife on their whiskey tasting list and also on their visiting list. I know you can't visit your distillery, but it's a place to go. I mean,
Yeah,
as a place to wander around, Fife it's not got the big, it's not got Ben Lomond or the huge mountains, but it's a stunning place.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the East Coast, so it's got that lovely sunnier weather than you get in the West Coast. As you said, it is a lovely area. But you also have areas of being really flat, so you can see for afar, to also having, there is hills, wouldn't say mountains, but there is hills around here. And the new distilleries are all open. So with the exception of Daft Mill and Cameron Bridge, because they're not open to public, but Lindores Abbey, Eden Mill and Kings Barnes are all open to the public and are all easily accessible. I mean, people when they come across the water, as you said, Fife is known for a lot of it's golf. So people tend to go to St Andrews' golf, and you can't play golf all the time, so they tend to come out a little bit. So Fife has it all. As I said at the start, we're very much just at the early discussions of it, and that's what I would like to see in the next coming years, is more people talking about the Fife region from whiskey. Rather, I mean, we come under what's defined as the lowlands, but the lowlands, people have a perception that one style of whiskey in the lowlands, and that's it. It's a lowland style. Well, in Fife, out of all the distilleries, we all produce something differently. So it's trying to re-educate people that it's about the location is part of it, but it doesn't define what we produce. We're quite different in how we go about doing and producing the same product, whiskey. So come across and see what we are all about and talk about. And with it being all new distilleries, they are looking at things in a slightly different way than what you would expect. So come across and see what we're all about.
Yeah, how do you get golf, whiskey and Fife in one word?
You've just
That's
done
the
it.
thing, isn't it?
You've just done it. Golf, whiskey, Fife. No.
I know, Hauf and Hauf, Fife. Hauf and golf, Fife.
There you go. Hauf
and golf, Fife. Don't know.
Something we need to work on. We need to get that tagline, I think.
Yeah. Great to talk to you and good luck. And thank you for the samples. Much appreciated. And all success to you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're never going home. We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives? We're never going home. Never going home. All it took was one sip of the water